Want your boss to put some real action behind the rhetoric when they talk about making your workplace more inclusive? Find out how to hold their feet to the fire to demand diversity on the Diversity Dude podcast with Reg Clark.
So I am so ready to keep this conversation moving, or as I was thinking today, am I? Like sometimes I think, do I really want to talk diversity? There's so many other topics I would like to talk about. I don't ever want to just seem like, I know my title is the Diversity Dude, and at first that was put together to be just tongue in cheek. There's so many other things. There's so many other facets to me and other things that interest me and that I would love to talk about. So today I was talking to my podcast boss, Shaletta. I'm like, Shaletta, is there anything else I can talk about diversity? She said, well, what are you going to talk about? When she asked me that, I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to talk about? I'm like, well, I could talk sports, but if I go to sports, then there's that aspect of Maria Taylor and Rachel Nichols and ESPN and that Haskell, and then there's that part about Simone Biles, or there's Colin Kaepernick and the NFL anytime the NFL comes up. So there's a racial part to that, a lack of diversity to that. I love to talk about arts and culture, music, but then somehow we get dragged into this idea of cultural misappropriation. And so that does away with that. I like to talk about current events, the vaccination. Well, then I'd have to talk about health disparities and why some people may not be as open to going to get the vaccinations. Love to talk about news and politics. They're so divisive that there's no way to talk about that without getting into this world of talking about diversity and inclusion, or the short term is race, right? So when I say diversity and inclusion, really talking about race, even though diversity and inclusion has so many more aspects to it. People with disabilities or different abilities, sexual orientation, gender, religion. There's so many other parts to this diversity and inclusion, but somehow we always seem to default to race. So when you go back and you listen to my podcast, which I hope you do, you will see that in a lot of my podcasts, I really try to talk about different things and broaden it out. I really would like to get outside of the idea of just simply talking race, because I feel like there's so many more facets to me as a person. And I say that, and I get personal today because I want you as individuals out there listening, if you happen to be a person of color, not to feel because you have more facets to yourself than just being a person of color. And I know how it is sometimes. If you're a person of color, if you happen to be a person of a different sexual orientation, if you happen to be a single parent, if you happen to be a woman, that sometimes you kind of put on the spot to talk as a representative for the entire group that you represent, when we know that you are so much more as a person, as an individual. There's so many other things that you love to talk about, that you'd like to get out there and be yourself, be your authentic self, be your whole self. And we talk about that, and we touch upon that in diversity and inclusion, the idea of bringing your whole self to work or being your authentic self. But I'm here to tell you, I believe that there are some people who just want us mired in this world of diversity and inclusion. That's all they want to do, is they want to keep it talking because it keeps them employed. It keeps them a job. The whole purpose for me doing this podcast was I wanted to get like just some truths out and just be honest and say some things don't work. You guys have heard me say, if your company needs a diversity and inclusion department, then what is your HR department doing? They're failing. That's exactly what your HR department is supposed to be doing. If we're still having this conversation about diversity and inclusion at the same level that we were having it at 40 years ago, that means we haven't made any progress. So we're continuing to have this conversation because nobody's really doing anything. So when you constantly hear heads of organizations saying they can't find talent from diverse backgrounds, or they talk about their own blind spots, it's all BS, because these are things that simply can be done if people chose to do it. So I feel like I'm in this space to talk about this topic of diversity and inclusion because I'm not beholden to anyone. I can have a very honest conversation. I can be who I am. And if I were to be who I am, then I'm going to be very honest. I am stuck in this purgatory somewhere between Martin Luther King of asking for justice and diversity and inclusion and Malcolm X, which is taking diversity and inclusion and making it happen. So there's a very thin line there that I tend to walk, and I'm internally tormented with it. So will I continue to talk diversity and inclusion? Absolutely. And I hope to talk about it in broader terms. And I hope that it helps someone. I hope that someone walks away feeling like, you know what, not only I feel like that, there are other people that feel like that. In my 20 plus years of doing human resources and diversity and inclusion, I've come across many situations. And it's so funny that when I talk to people, sometimes they feel like it's only them. And I'm like, no, there've been tons of other people that feel that way. You're not alone in your feelings, and you're not crazy. You're not crazy for feeling the way that you feel. So don't feel like that. No matter how much somebody may try to demean you or make you feel that your feelings aren't valid, or that you may be overreacting to something, or that you're taking it very personal because of your color, your gender, your sexual orientation, your religion. If you're taking it in a personal way, it's because something made it feel personal to you. Let's not forget what the great Maya Angelou said. She said that people may forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So if people are saying something, then they're making you feel a certain kind of way. So at some point, what my real hope is, what my real desire is to have this conversation of diversity and inclusion, help other people have this conversation in a very honest way, um, and not be afraid. Maybe, just maybe I plant a seed into someone to say something different, or to stand up for themselves, or advocate for something else, whether they be an advocate for someone, or whether they be someone who feels like they come from a marginalized group, that there's a sense of empowerment, that through having these conversations, that we get more and more courageous, we get more bold, we get bolder in our sense of being able to have this conversation, to talk about not only diversity and inclusion and what it is, but what it isn't. And that we can talk about what hasn't happened in this world of diversity and inclusion. And we can talk about why we've been having this conversation for so long, and we still don't seem to be making any progress in it. The fact that these things that we're saying are not much further past our old sitcom, and I'm dating myself here, All in the Family. As a matter of fact, I feel like we had more progress when we're talking more open and more bold. And that's why I said sometimes we have to get beyond this whole cancel culture thing, because that's just convenient. Let's just not talk about it. Let's just cancel it, rather than really getting it out in the open and saying, let's just sit down and have a real conversation. It's going to make some people uncomfortable. It's going to make some people angry. But through that anger, through that discomfort, maybe we can come back and find some kind of accord. Maybe we can find something that brings us together in the name of progress. But I think as long as we sit back and we're able to point fingers, and we're able to argue, and we're not able to really have a real conversation, we'll be where we are in this space right now. So check your headlines, watch what happens, listen to what's going on around you, listen to as people continue to promise and pledge and make commitments, but never make any real changes. There's never anything substantive done in order to be progressive. So when I go to my podcast boss, Shaletta, and be like, can I do anything other than diversity? And then she asked me that sober question, what else would you do? it hits home to me that maybe this is my spot. Maybe this is my lane. Maybe I bring a little something different to the table in the world of diversity and inclusion. And I hope to keep bringing it to you for a long time. So I am going to pay the meter and park it right there. Thank you.
Tune in each week as Reg Clark shows you how to demand and implement diversity and inclusion at your job. To hear more, check out his previous shows on ShalettaMakesMeLaugh.com.